Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to How I Read a Chart, version number 4. We're going to do 2 more charts today, and my name is Anthony Picco, and I've been a professional astrologer for over 30 years, and this is a system I've come up with. It's basically a step-by-step look at how I find my way into a natal chart, and into the head and heart of the person. I want to make a point. This is your way in, okay? It's kind of like you get to a house. This technique will get you to unlock the door. You'll get into the kitchen, the living room, and the bedroom maybe. But there's more. I just want to mention, if you can take it a lot further. This is just your first step to get into the chart, and then there's declinations, there's midpoints, there's many astrological things that you can do. So I just want to mention that this is your way in, and then you can take it further when you get your own charts that you're working on. So we have 2 charts, and the first one, I like to redraw my charts because that's just what I do. I'm a graphic designer, and I get to know the chart that way. So first step, there's not a lot going on here. There's two stelliums in opposite houses, and that's going to be interesting when we get to it. She's born on March 10th, 1965 at 1:07 a.m., so I'm trusting that particular birth time. You don't often see 1:07 on a birth certificate. So the first thing I always do is I highlight the sun and moon and rising sign, because this is your foundation. This is what the whole chart is built on. Nothing in the chart will completely deny what the sun and the moon and the rising sign are talking about. So we have a Pisces. We all know about Pisces: sensitive, empathetic, emotional, tuning into other people. And yet her moon is in Gemini, so when she goes to her emotions, it comes off in a very kind of activated way. So it kind of balances out well. She may be a bit very emotional with her sun, but she's got things under control a little bit with an air sign in a moon. And across the way, Sag rising. So we have a light, kind of breezy person exterior here, open to people, open to new ideas, and emotionally open in some way that's going to process stuff pretty well. So the next thing I always do is I add in the conjunctions, and that's conjunctions to other planets and conjunctions to the angles. I consider the angles very important. So here, Madam D, as the letter D indicates, it's got a bunch of stuff conjunct, and of course, right up top, bam, there's our 60s baby. She's got Pluto and Uranus conjunct at 14 and 12 degrees Virgo, respectively. Everybody born from about 63 to about 68-ish has this in their chart. This is the same energy that kind of produced the craziness of the 1960s. That's inside of all these people. On top of it, she's got Mars conjunct Pluto. So she's got a tremendous amount of power going on, even if they're all retrograde. You get Pluto conjunct Mars, and you've got like a tremendous amount of dominating power if you need it. There's a desire to do it by the rules and be practical, and you'd also break up the rules because Uranus is conjunct Pluto. So we've got that going on right off the bat. So we drop down to the bottom. We see that the Saturn is conjunct Venus, and Venus is conjunct the sun. So we have somebody who is charming, chatty. Saturn and Venus and the sun conjunct may give somebody a certain amount of charm. It's a little wide, but I give it a little extra. I usually use a 7-degree orb, but for the sun, I'll stretch it a bit. But she's got Saturn conjunct Venus, and that makes somebody very careful and very cautious in relationships. They're not going to rush into relationships, even with the moon in Gemini, in the 7th house cusp. She may have many different kinds of relationships, but she's not necessarily going to run in right away. This is probably going to help her as a Pisces because it'll protect her a little bit. She's not going to get necessarily sucked in to a toxic relationship of any kind. And finally, Mercury is conjunct the nadir in Aries, a very active mind, very buzzing mind. Her inner self is kind of whipping around there and constantly maybe a little high strong energy there. So the next thing I always do is I put in what I consider the positive aspects, which are trines, and I like to start with the positivity. And we have, we got Sun trine Neptune, really nice spiritual connection. As a matter of fact, it's almost to 20 minutes apart. That's pretty tight for Sun trine Neptune. So she's got a natural kind of spiritual connection going on. She's got Jupiter trining the Virgo trio up in the 9th house. That's possibly good. The biggest thing with the Jupiter trine is sometimes as positive as it might be, you can go overboard and get a little kind of crazy with it. So the biggest risk I'm thinking is she might have temper issues, just from that alone, kind of expanding out there, and Jupiter bringing this kind of quality to it. So the next thing I add in are the what we call the difficult or challenging aspects, which are squares and oppositions. And here we go. We got some problems. Okay, T-square. Those two stelliums are opposing each other and squaring the moon. So she's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 planets tied up in this T-square. This is going to be important in some way, shape, or form. She's got moon square Pluto, issues with women, issues with mom, moon square Mars, a very kind of bit of a temper at times, moon square Uranus, kind of disruptive emotions. And then we go down to the other side. We got Saturn opposite Mars, which you have kind of a push-pull that can go on there. So she may hold back, she may charge forward. She's got Venus opposite Uranus, unusual relationships, attracted to offbeat people. Venus opposite Pluto, she's going to possibly get into power issues in relationships, possibly domination or being dominated in some way, shape, or form. And well, Venus opposite Mars isn't that terrible, but there's this back and forth between male, female, and aggression. And again, aggressiveness too is coming out here. So we've got somebody who's kind of controlled, a little wary of other people, seems sort of breezy. You know, she's Sag rising, she's a Pisces, she's, you know, moon in Gemini. So when you first meet her, she's going to appear light and friendly, but there's a lot of stuff going on inside there. Moon square Pluto is profoundly deep. You know, real issues with mom there. And then Saturn is opposite Pluto and Uranus. So dad is a problem too. And the other thing going on is an opposition from Neptune down to Jupiter. The biggest thing when Jupiter gets out of hand, like an opposition, is it blows it up a little bigger than it needs to be. Ideally, creativity be a great outlet for her, any kind of intuition, meditation, anything that would help her process that Jupiter opposite Neptune and keep it from going kind of overboard, because that's what happens when Jupiter goes bad. It pushes you over the top and makes you overdo and get yourself in trouble sometimes. So then I add the minor aspects. Think just a couple of sextiles, but that's good because it's tying together the T-square to the trines a little better and making the chart more organically connected. I like to see everything aspecting everything else. And for the most part, that's going on in this chart, except for Mercury all by itself down at the bottom. Well, let's look at these. We have Jupiter sextiling the sun, so that brings some more strength to that Neptune trine the sun. In a pleasant way. It's a sextile. So she's expansive, she's open-minded, and then your standard Neptune sextiling Pluto, but it's also sextiling Mars and Uranus. So I'm hoping that when she's not lost in anger, because she's got, you know, Mars and Pluto conjunct squaring the moon, she can find a spiritual outlet for her anger and her frustrations. Now, the next step I always do is these 5 words, okay? This is what everybody wants to know from their chart. What about my career? What about my relationships? What about my health? Family, I should actually say family and home. They kind of go together. And finally, finances become an issue. And these are the 5 things that everybody wants to know about. This covers all the areas. And so what I do is on the chart, my way of scribbling things, I write, oh, got a little out of hand there, let me reduce that. I write the categories: career, relationships, health, family, finances. And then underneath each one, I look for the aspects and qualities in the chart that are going to speak to me about that particular issue. So with career, well, we look to the midheaven, it's in Libra. There's obviously going to be a social career of some kind. She's going to want to work with other people, whether it's working for them or connecting with them in some way. She's got Mars, how she does her work in Virgo, hard worker, detail worker, irritating worker to other people, because people Mars and Virgo are working after everybody's gone home. They're still working to get the job done. It's conjunct Pluto. When she gets the job underway, she is going to finish it. Okay, absolutely, with that Pluto charge there. And Uranus brings, again, a little bit of offbeat quality to the work process. She's also got Jupiter in the sixth house, which, if the 10th house is career, the sixth house is your workplace, and her workplace is beneficial to her. It helps her out. Jupiter's down there, and it's saying kind of things are okay when I go to work, wherever that is. I'm going to expect probably some variety to her career too, because Uranus is conjuncting Mars, and that always brings unusual changes and switching around. Now, relationships. Venus is conjunct Saturn, so she's going to be wary in some ways and maybe held back a little bit in relationships. And Saturn and Venus are opposite Pluto and squaring the moon, opposite actually Pluto, Mars, and Uranus. And that Jupiter, excuse me, the Mars, hold on a second, I know my planets. The moon in Gemini on the 7th house cusp is again suggesting varieties of partners, different kinds of people, maybe a little breeziness, and yet Mars opposite Venus, Pluto opposite Venus, Saturn conjunct Venus. This is a kind of a intense quality to the stuff that goes on in her relationships. And we go down to health. She's got a pretty good health. The reason being that when you see Mars conjunct Pluto, there's kind of a vitality that's very strong. If Mars is kind of your physical body and activity, Pluto kind of like adds a little bit of nuclear power to it. So there might be a possibility of a little bit of accidents because Uranus is conjunct Mars. I would imagine they would not be casual accidents. The reason that Pluto usually makes things kind of heavy. So any accident that she has will be kind of a major deal in some way, shape, or form, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Okay, and the moon is in Gemini, so when you see the moon in Gemini or a lot of Gemini in a chart, nerves become an issue, kind of certain high-strung quality becomes a potential issue going on there. So relationships, moodiness, of course. The moon, even if it's in Gemini, is on the descendant. Emotional partnerships, power struggles in relationships. We mentioned that earlier. She's going to marry somebody from another country. Why? Look what's in the 9th house. This is a person that is not going to stay where they were born. Particularly with Uranus in the 9th house, it often suggests marriage to a, quotes, foreigner. It's not exactly the best word to use, but you understand what I mean. So yes, interesting story that plays out in this chart. She was in an awful relationship when she was younger. It was, I never got quite enough details from her, but it was emotionally abusive. The person was dominating, kind of made her feel like a piece of garbage. And it was just a very traumatic experience for her. So the first major relationship she's got, Pluto is opposite Venus and squaring the moon. And it seemed to me that the partner was manifesting the Pluto thing in an abusive and kind of unusual way. Also, the Venus opposite Uranus is bringing in somebody unusual and unexpected. What happens is she breaks free of the relationship, and she has a good friend of hers that really supports her during this recovery period, and they start hanging out together and they get into a relationship. But she tells me that she gets into this relationship because she feels she kind of owes the guy, and they get along really well, and she figured, what the heck, why not? But she didn't feel a deep passion for him. So she gets into this kind of Gemini moon quality going on. It's like, well, he's interesting, but I'm not really committing to him. She's tapping into that Venus conjunct Saturn, so she's kind of pulling back and not really giving all in some way. And also, what's interesting is that she meets the guy in Europe, and together they end up owning, I'm not sure if it was a ski lodge or some sort of a restaurant in the French Alps at a resort. So now she's working overseas and married to a foreigner, just like the chart promises. But it doesn't quite work out. I mentioned she was accident prone, and after a long time relationship with this guy, and they still get along, she's out skiing and there's an avalanche and she gets caught up in it. She's not particularly injured. He does get her and rescues her and stuff. And she takes this as a sign that this isn't where she belongs. And he wasn't exactly shocked. She sells her share of the business to him and comes back to the United States, not to where she was born, but she is in California. And what does she do? She goes back to the career she had before that, which was in the arts. She was a designer, a commercial artist. So we see Venus again getting caught up. Venus, remember, is conjunct the sun, and that's trining into Neptune. So there's a very strong creative quality to her chart, comes to her very naturally, very organically. But that doesn't quite work out for her. And what she ends up doing now is she is a portrait photographer, and she makes unusual portraits. They're not bizarre or anything, but they're not your standard. Here I am posing with my significant other next to me. They're very creative. They're interesting poses. They're interesting backgrounds. She really tries to capture the person. So now she's tapping into that Venus conjunct Saturn. She's kind of using that Piscean energy to sort of like really connect to the other person and hone them and focus them and give them an unusual picture, going back up to Uranus and Mars and Pluto conjunct, that kind of tunes into the person and has kind of an emotional content for the person she's doing the photograph with, which is really working quite well for her. She meets somebody in the States. This is a friend of mine. I've met him, and he's quite an oddball, but he's a very gentle, kind, artistic guy, and they've been getting along fine for the last number of years, and I'm seeing that she's kind of finally, I guess, gone through the two extremes, the overbearing, dominating Pluto trip, then the I'm not even going to connect to anybody, Saturn conjunct Venus kind of quality to her. And then she finds a relationship where there's a good balance. He's creative, she's creative. They support each other emotionally and creatively, and it works really well for them. Family issues are a bit of a hassle here. We go down over to the family era. We have Sun square Moon, which means dad and mom were not getting along when you were conceived. Aspects between the Sun and the Moon actually reflect what was going on when you were made into a little zygote before you joined the world, when mom and dad first created you. And she's also got Venus conjunct Saturn, and Saturn is squaring the Moon. So again, mom is kind of aloof in some way, but mom's kind of, there's a power struggle going on. Pluto is squaring the Moon, Uranus is squaring the Moon, Mars is squaring the Moon. So she's got her temper, she fights with her mom. There's even, to a certain degree in her life, kind of a denial of the stereotypical feminine. Okay, she prefers hanging out with men. I mention that because often Mars and Pluto squaring the Moon says that somebody has issues with women, whether they're male or female, doesn't matter. They have issues with the female and mother and women in general. So she actually prefers the company of men, generally speaking. She's also got kind of a very busy, dad's aloof. Okay, I'm sorry if I'm jumping around a little bit. Dad's aloof. Why? Saturn is opposite Mars and Pluto. It's squaring the Moon. It's a wide but conjunction of Saturn. Dad's very pulled back. If I remember correctly, her dad moved back to Europe in the middle of their marriage and left the family behind. So dad was just like gone. So mom became more dominating because she had to be. She's a single mother, and it became kind of an issue for her. But she did manage to get through it, and seems to be doing well at this point in her life. And finances, she knows how to sock it away. She's got Capricorn on her second house cusp, and she knows how to spend money, and she knows how to save money and use it in a very Capricorn practical kind of a way. Interesting to me, the North Node is in Gemini in the seventh house conjunct that Moon. So I'm wondering if the North Node to me is a direction to go where you will learn the most. And it seems to me that she's been through a number of Gemini-like relationships in the sense that they've all kind of been different. There's nothing really, one was dominating, one was like kind of weak, a weak friendship, love, whatever you want to call it. And then she gets into one that's more well balanced all around. So it's almost like she's worked her way through her North Node to find a relationship that has that Gemini quality and that she can connect with and have a solid relationship with. And I believe I pretty much covered the chart in general. If anybody has questions about the chart or questions about how I'm pulling these rabbits out of my hat, feel free to ask. Going once. Hello. I am being heard, aren't I?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Just want to make sure.
If you want a question, you need to give us time to think of the question.
Oh, sure. Okay. Just want to make sure.
But if there aren't any questions, you could just continue.
Okay. Going once, going twice. Okay. Chart number 2. I know this person really, really well. She's a very good friend of mine. I got lots of stuff to say about this chart. First glance, there's nothing obviously outrageous about this chart. There seems like there's a conjunction here and there. October 7th, 1964 at 10 p.m. I know that's rounded off. The funny thing is her birth certificate said 10 a.m., but her mother was conscious during the birth and looked at the clock when she heard her daughter cry, and it was 10 a.m. and she knew it, damn it. I mean, it might be 10:03 or 10:04, but it's definitely 10 o'clock, and it's close enough, particularly after I've known her over 30 years. This chart completely fits this woman. If it's not accurate at 10, maybe it's 10:02 or 9:58 or something like that. So, in the highlighted moon and sun and rising sign. So we have a sun in Libra. So we have somebody into balance, in harmony, being aware of other people, being able to be sociable and pleasant. I do want to mention Libras are not all peace and harmony. They are into balance, which means if you come on like a gangbuster, a Libra will come back on you to you like a gangbuster. So I want to just dispel any ideas that Libras are all like into harmony and peace. They'd like harmony and peace, but they'll kick your butt if they have to. And it matters in this chart as we get in here. The moon is in Scorpio. I know sometimes people say the moon is in detriment in Scorpio. I just say the moon, when it's in Scorpio, really needs to be handled. And Isabel Hickey even says that people don't come in for the first time in reincarnation with a Scorpio moon. They got to get some experience in there. So there's a very passionate core to this woman. But there's a Libra up top, so there's a sign of a sociable quality, but there's real passion underneath. And we go over to the rising sign, and she's a chatty Gemini rising, and she does like to talk. And the reason I think this chart is also accurate is because, yes, Gemini rising makes sense, but her face is like a big old moon, and most of the rest of the first house is in Cancer. So I can understand a late Gemini with a full moon first house makes sense in her chart. So chatty, friendly person with a kind of a deep, intense core. So let's see how deep. The next thing we add are the conjunctions. Bingo. So let's start at top. Saturn is conjunct to midheaven. Okay, a lot of hard work in her life. And delayed success, and I want to mention, when Saturn delays success, it doesn't just decide you're not going to be successful for 30 years. It waits until you're ready to become successful. So if you're ready at 25, you'll get there. If you're ready at 55, you'll get there. But there's a lot of work involved in it. At the bottom of the chart, we have Venus conjunct the nadir in Virgo. So there's something very harmonious deep inside her in Venus, with Venus down there, except right next to it, there she is, another 60s baby, 12 degrees and 15 degrees for Uranus and Pluto, respectively, in Virgo. So there's a desire for a beautiful home. There's a desire for a peaceful interior, but Uranus and Pluto are down there and kind of blowing things up on her. We swing around up to the moon, and the moon is conjunct Neptune in Scorpio. Moon conjunct Neptune is a tough one because I don't believe in the word overly emotional. I don't think anybody's overly emotional. We all have our own ways of being emotional, but people with the moon conjunct Neptune have ways of being very, very emotional, not necessarily realistically emotional, which isn't invalidating the emotions, but sometimes they may have such a strong reaction that people may be put off by them. It's kind of like, whoa, wait, holy cow, what's going on? Take it easy. And finally, we have Sun conjunct Mercury in Libra. So she's got a good mind going, a buzz going on. Sun conjunct Mercury is always the mind is kind of cooking. And it's in Libra, so she's a fair and balanced thinker. Okay, so now we add the trines. And there are none. There are no trines in her chart. So we got to go right to the hard aspects, which she's got. There's a T-square. Saturn is opposite Venus and squaring Jupiter. Now she's already got an issue with Saturn and with Venus in Virgo. You tend to be a bit of a nag, a bit of a fuss budget. I do want to mention that Venus in Virgo is actually very much into perfecting a partner or making a partner better in some way, shape, or form. The Virgo isn't nagging just because they're a nag. They want to perfect everything. They want to make you better when Venus is in Virgo. The question is, they may not always pay attention to who actually wants to be helped. So that's an issue that may come up. And on top of it, she's got Saturn opposite Venus. This is a big issue in her chart. Saturn opposite Venus can make every relationship a chore. Every relationship is a responsibility. When you reach out to other people, either you have to do something for them, you have to be responsible for them. So to a certain degree, this person is not going to rush into relationships because there's some part of her that knows that every time she gets close to somebody, she's going to have to be responsible for them in some way, or she's simply going to feel she has to be, whether she needs to be or not. That's a whole nother story. And it's being squared by Jupiter. So again, that Jupiter square kind of ramps things up. So she's really going to be dedicated to taking care of people in kind of a practical, efficient way. This is not necessarily a hugger or a squeezer kind of a way. This is a person who's very practical in the way they take care of other people. The other thing going on, and this is a Lulu, like the other chart, Moon is squaring Mars, but Moon is conjunct Neptune, right? So we've got these very intense emotions, and it goes right down to Mars. Every emotional experience she has, her first thing is to travel down that square, put her dukes up, and start a fight, okay? This has been her first response to almost every situation that she gets into. I meet her, I call her up on the phone, and the first thing I hear is, I'm really annoyed about, and then just fill in the blank, because she's annoyed about something, always. And I'm also hearing about the fights she gets into. She's constantly getting into fights in the street. Now, when I say fight, I'm not talking about fisticuffs, but she will always make a point of if somebody's doing something wrong in the street or somebody's causing trouble, she'll step in and do something about it. I remember one time walking with her, and some guy steps out of a cab and starts yelling at this woman, and she, from across the street, she screams, "You leave her alone and you get back in your cab," because she has this wonderful Neptune conjunct the Moon sense of caring and empathy about the world, and there's this quality that she has, Saturn opposite Venus. Other people have to be taken care of. So yes, she gets angry a lot. Yes, it can be seen as a bit off-putting to some people, but 95% of the time, the direction she's going with it is actually from a pure, decent place. It's just that most people don't expect this all the time. She's real heart and core New Yorker, the stereotype New Yorker. Hey, yo, hey. Okay, that's her. She'll start any fight if it needs to be taken care of. Okay. I also want to mention, by the way, Neptune square Mars. Stay out of the kitchen, stay away from fire, stay away from sharp objects, because knives and fire are Mars. A square to Neptune means that you really don't know how to handle this. You're confused about it. It can be a problem. It can be an issue. I know once upon a time, before I met her, she was going to surprise her girlfriend with dinner, and The girlfriend came home and the fire department was putting out the curtains because she'd managed to set fire to the curtains in the kitchen. I also saw her one time. She was going to make some frozen chicken pot pies. And if you know any of those frozen chicken pot pies, you have to like cut little vents in the top of the pie before you put it in the oven. She's holding it in her hand and stabbing on top of it. And I was like, stop, put that down. Because I'm figuring any second she's going to go through the pie and stab herself in the hand. So, and it's very strong in her chart. So do not, Neptune square Mars, keep these people out of the kitchen and away from fire and sharp objects. Okay, minor aspects. Let's say it in some minor aspects. Okay, this isn't too bad. Some sextiles connecting some things that were not quite attached. Mars is sextiling the Sun and Mercury, so that helps her connect to it in a very genuine way. Uranus and Pluto are, of course, sextiling Neptune, but they're also sextiling the moon. So there's a kind of a depth to her emotions, adding in a sextile to Pluto, and often unusual emotions, but again, very, very deeply felt. There's a tremendous amount of integrity in this person. Regardless of how many fights she gets into in the street or the trouble she stirs up, there's always integrity involved. It's that Virgo conjunct, Uranus conjunct Pluto in Virgo, and that empathetic Neptune and Moon that really make her, and Libra Sun also wants to take care of other people and be kind to them. And bingo, Saturn up on the midheaven, hard work, a lot of hard work in this person's life. And she's willing to do it. And there's a certain self-effacement. Why? She's a Libra. So she's very open to doing for other people. The only time she really lets her ego turn up is go down to that Mars. And where is it? It's in Leo. So she's an artist in fighting, so to speak. And I also want to point out that Venus, the T-square, is not connected to the other planets in the chart. There's no sextile, there's no square or anything to the rest of the chart. So let's go to the words that we put in: career, relationship, health, family, home, and finances. Career-wise, Saturn is on the midheaven, so there's going to be a restrictive, hardworking quality, which will eventually be rewarded when she's ready to be rewarded. But I want to point out that her midheaven is at 0 degrees Pisces. And remember, this Saturn is opposite Venus. Her career is as an assistant to a PR guru. He doesn't do public relations. What he does is he's a consultant about public relations. He helps give advice for companies that are PR companies. He holds award programs for good PR programs, and her boss believes that the best PR is transparency. The more honest you are, the better your company will do. I'm pointing all this out because she's got Pisces in the midheaven with a Saturn in Aquarius. So we have somebody who's very conscientious about the world. The person she's working for is he's an Aquarius, and he's very open to new ideas in PR, and also she's a personal assistant, so go right back down to the bottom of the chart. There's that Saturn opposite Venus, taking care of other people. Every time she gets in a relationship, this time she's his personal assistant. Books his flights, does the bookkeeping for the company, he even turned to her once and said she was the only person in the company that put in a full day's work because it's a small company, and she's the one that kind of holds it together. Okay, and okay, I made a mistake, by the way. I accidentally wrote in red here that Neptune and the Moon are in the 6th. That's only because it's skewed. I did that under health too. Ignore those. I don't mean it to be in the 6th house. Relationships. Okay, in the 7th house, we've got Sagittarius on the cusp. She doesn't really want to be tied down. She didn't want to get married. She did end up married. She's been married about 28, 29 years now, and she still keeps telling her husband that she doesn't want to be married. They get along, they work fine, but I don't want to be concerned about somebody else. I want to be free, which the Sag on the 7th house cusp, I want to be free. combined with Saturn opposite Venus, you get in a relationship and you're kind of chained to them because you got to take care of them. It's perfectly logical. She doesn't want to be in a marriage, but she is. Okay. Also, as I've mentioned, since we're still talking in relationships, I'll bring back the stuff I mentioned: Venus opposite Saturn, squaring Jupiter. This need to take care of other people. There's a tremendous empathy and caring, emotional connection when she loves somebody. That's that moon and Neptune conjunct gives an incredible passionate quality. And when she's doing the chores for people, it comes from a deep place. Again, she's not particularly demonstrative about these things, but there's a passion to what she does all the time. And a combativeness too. When she's in relationships, it's always she's not the kind of person to sit around and hang out and watch TV with a partner of any kind, whether it's a friend or not. That Mars squaring in there, things have to be happening all the time. Okay. Health-wise, although I did mistakenly write Neptune conjunct the moon in the 6th house, it's in the 5th house, but you got stomach issues here. The moon is conjunct Neptune and squaring Mars. She should not eat when she's upset. She should be careful what she eats. There's a possibility of upset stomachs. She's only got one stomach, and just agitation. With emotional agitation leads to what Isabel Hickey refers to as a red stomach. But there's also a lot of creativity, I just want to mention, because Neptune and the moon are in the 5th house, even if it's squaring Mars. And it has taken her a long time, but lately she's gotten into creativity for its own sake. She's always tried to be creative, but she always felt responsible for other people. And being a Libra and the Virgo and the Venus in the Virgo, she would tend to give it up for other people and say, well, I've got to take care of this person. I've got to be kind to them. I've got to fix this. So she wouldn't always make space for herself. But I have found one of the best things that she's done, excuse me, in recent years, about 5 or 6 years ago, she got into transcendental meditation twice a day and has gotten a much better handle on that Neptune conjunct the moon. She's now comes to understand. She's turned to me and said, I must be pretty difficult. And gee, I get angry a lot and I'm always annoyed. And I'm like, why, yes, you do. And she's becoming to find a way to own it for herself. The transcendental meditation, I guess, is helping rein in or make the Neptune flow a little better with the Mars. As I always mention, oppositions and squares can be turned into positive things, but you do have to pay attention to them and work them. They don't just automatically flow into place like a trine or a sextile of any kind. There have also been health issues in general, starting from childhood. One of the interesting things, Mars is in the 3rd house, which is still a house of early childhood. So there were some accidents in early childhood, and towards the middle of her teen years, her nose was broken. And it has been set and reset about 5 or 6 times. There's always been complications. There's a frustration of trying to get things to heal and work better. She's excuse me. There's a lot of issues there with her health in terms of trying to get things finalized. Mars she keeps having aberrations. Of course, Mars is squaring into that Neptune and Moon conjunction. So there's always there are those knives again, causing her grief, whether she's wielding them or somebody else is wielding them. And although they're wielding them to help and heal her, it has yet to quite be finalized and fixed and made completely whole. Family and home. Well, she wants a nice home. She's got Venus on the nadir. It's a sign of a person that wants an attractive home in some way, a social home in some way. However, she's also got Uranus and Pluto down there too. So as an adult, her home is a little offbeat, unusual, though she tries very much to make it attractive. You wouldn't walk in there and expect, house and garden beauty. It's a very attractive apartment. It's very nicely put. The colors are a little unusual. The way things are set up is unusual, but she does try to make it very nice and very focused for her. However, we roll this back to family, and we have problems here. Dad, Saturn at the midheaven, there's a desire for father images in her life to some degree, but it's opposite Venus, and dad is aloof. Dad is a problem. Dad becomes the Pluto and the Venus. Mom is like completely foggy. I mean, she's Fogggy in case it didn't sound right. Neptune is conjunct the moon, squaring Mars. Mom was this incredible disciplinarian, but at times completely irrationally so. She would be made to do things and called to task for things. And she's like, what did I do? Why am I being punished? Why am I being forced to do this stuff? Mom would just make her do it. Mom had a lot of anger and took it out on her daughter. And to a certain degree, like the previous chart, Moon square Mars, there is not a traditional stereotypical femininity about this woman. She's a little tomboyish, and even said as much as a child. Oh, look, Mars is in the early years of her life. She'd be climbing trees. She didn't care what was going on. She didn't want to behave like a girl, as we stereotypically refer to it as. Mom and dad were a problem. The childhood was a problem. There was Uranus standing with Pluto, disruption, power struggles, angry mom frustrating a dominating dad who's still very distant in some way. It was not a pleasant childhood. And like the day she turned 18, she was like, boom, out of there. And has been living on her own since. She still has contact with her family. I don't want to suggest she disappeared from them completely, but she just wanted to get away from it as much and as quickly as possible. What else? It's good. Over the years, I've seen her become more self-oriented. And I think it's important for her. There's a little too much between Saturn opposite Venus, serving other people, Libra, Mercury conjunct Libra, Sun in Libra. So you have all this energy being given to other people that I've been happy to see her start being creative on her own. Neptune and the moon are in the 5th house of creative self-expression. She's been doing craft work. She's been doing beading. She's been doing artwork just for her own satisfaction. And it's good for her because her North Node is on her ascendant in Gemini, and so it's really, to me, calls for her to come out more and to come out and play and be yourself, and not necessarily always be serving other people, even if that is a big part of who you are. You want to be careful with that because she can surrender too much. And I will say, lately, in the past couple of years, I have seen her pull back much more from people who are vampires, so to speak. The thing I always talk to people who are fairly empathetic is empathy comes from seeing somebody as they really are, deep inside, spiritually speaking. And, you know, we're all born perfect. We're all born this wonderful shining light. And then along the way, we get some bad programming, we get confused, we get problems. And what happens is when you're an empathetic, caring person, you want to heal everybody, because what happens is you see the core inside the person that is the beautiful soul they were born with, for want of a better term. I'm using these terms loosely. And so you end up going to try to help these people because you want to see that beautiful soul manifest in a healthier way. But sometimes you may see this beautiful soul inside an alcoholic that does not want to get better yet, or inside a person that likes to mooch and drive other people crazy. And she's beginning to learn finally how to tell the difference between the people she can actually heal and help and those that she's just being chore-like with. Again, chore comes up. Venus in Virgo, opposite Saturn. I can't stress it strongly enough in her chart, particularly because it's on the nadir and the midheaven. So it's, and the other thing about her career work, by the way, I met her at a job, and she used to work until 9 or 10 o'clock at night every night. And she finally said, I've had it with this. And she got a new job, the job with the PR guru. And she still works till 9 or 10 at night. She's just got Saturn on the midheaven and is determined to get everything done that needs to get done and take care of everything and fix everything. Financially, you'd think she'd be doing a little better with Cancer on the 2nd house, but her compassion for people, about half of what she earns goes to charities and goes out into the world to help the world. So that's pretty much what we see here with this woman from October 7th, 1964. So we have about 10 minutes or so left. If there's any questions you have about either chart or about the techniques I use or what I might do, what problems I might run into that you want to have, you're curious about, ask away.
Hi, Anthony. It's Linda.
Yes.
I have a question about her T-square. And in terms of her relationships, that Jupiter squaring Saturn and Venus, does she make a bid for freedom, like with her in her relationships? Is she always like trying to get away, or I don't know? How does that play out?
Well, I think the Sag on the 7th house is the trying to get away. I find with the Jupiter square, again, when Jupiter misfires, it overdoes it. Her husband lost his job and they didn't have a lot of money, but she paid for a trip. She saved and paid for a trip to England because he'd always wanted to go to England, and she thought he needed it. Okay. He's not working. She's working. Jupiter is going overboard, taking care of other people and serving other people and giving them what they want in denial of what she wants. When you think about somebody who's the only working person in the family and she's springing for a ticket and 10 days in England, that's where I see the Jupiter getting out of hand. She tends to completely overdo for other people, giving money. Got a cousin who's uptight. We go visit them. The next thing I know, she's giving them $100, because, well, they need the money. It's like, well, you need it too, and I'm not against helping people, but I feel that she over helps people. And that's what I see the Jupiter doing to that T-square. It's kind of puffing up, so to speak, or blowing up that Saturn opposite Venus caretaker quality that she has. She wants to get away with the Sag on the descendant. That's when she doesn't even want to connect to people. Like, leave me alone. And actually, I do want to mention something while I'm at it. She needs to do physical activity to burn away some of that Mars square. And for a while, for about 5 years, she ran and would go up and she lives near Central Park, and she would go up and circle the park like 3 times when she went up, which it's a huge park. And she would run for like an hour and a half. And eventually she had issues with her knees and stuff, and she couldn't do that anymore. But physical activity is important to her too. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent there, but I forgot to mention that. So does that make sense, Linda?
Absolutely. Thanks for that.
No problem at all.
Yeah.
Hi, Anthony.
Hello.
Hi. The nodes. So do you just keep a mental note of where the nodes are?
Yeah. About in this particular chart?
Yeah.
Oh, well, she's got them right on she's got the north node right on the ascendant and Gemini. And to me, some people think of north node as karma. I know evolutionary astrology is very strong in that. I do definitely see the north node as the direction to go if you want to grow. Okay. So you don't necessarily have to go in that direction. You can come and have 3 more lives in a row working at the same issue, but that's the direction you will grow the most. But it's also an uncomfortable direction for most people. Her south node is over in the 7th house. So she's, again, very good at helping other people and connecting to other people, even if she has some resentment about it, even if she's frustrated about it. That's where the south node to me is your toolbox, the things you've already mastered, the things that it's easy to do. And in many ways, it is easier for her to serve other people than it is to be herself with the Gemini North Node on her ascendant. Again, somebody who's constantly self-effacing and feeling that she has to take care of the world all the time. So that's what I see going on in her North Node. Does that answer your question? As I understood it?
Yeah, it does. Also just wondering if there's a reason why you don't draw them into the chart and use their aspects.
Because, well, I guess I don't. I I tend to see the North Node as kind of a separate thing. I don't always bring the aspects in. I mean, in her case, it does trine her Saturn, and that ties it into the whole T-square in its own way, because it's it also, well, it's a little wide, but it sextiles the Venus, so that ties it into that. So that may even drag her back. It may be easier for her to slide back and go to the Saturn opposite Venus. I don't throw aspects in. I tend to be a very, I use the term meat and potatoes astrologer. I tend to shy away from like a lot of the more obscure aspects. I only use conjunctions to angles, like if something is square in the midheaven or trine the midheaven. I don't often give it a full weight that some people do. But again, this is this system I've come up with is to get you into the chart, and then you can take it further. As I mentioned at the beginning of the thing, this chat, I get you in the living room, I get you in the kitchen, I get you past the front door, but there's a lot of things to explore in every chart, whether it's north nodes or declinations or midpoints or part of fortune or other things. I just put this kind of together to help people just sort of get right into the chart, and then they can take it further as they wish. Okay. Looks like I finished up a little early this time.
Okay, no, not too early, only like about 7 minutes early. That's okay. Let's just see if there are any final questions. Let's just give it another minute.
Oh, sure. Until somebody says something, I came up with this really because my own frustration. Sometimes when I'd look at a chart and you would see like all these planets and I couldn't figure out how they fit together. And when I came up with the idea of the 5 topics, the career, the relationship, health, and I was able to focus on what was real. I wasn't thinking so much about what planet was in which sign, as opposed to what goes under this category and how does it get affected. So it really helped me kind of work out the chart. And I do want to mention a lot of what I do in this particular system was very strongly inspired by Stephen Forrest. Astrology wrote a number of wonderful books, but my favorite book is The Inner Sky, which is a excellent, serious introduction to astrology that doesn't do the listing every planet and every sign. He really kind of cuts it down to the core, like I try to do here, and then build it back up. So I've sort of been inspired by him, and I've taken a little bit further. But if you like the ideas I put forward here of how to look at a chart, Inner Sky by Stephen Forrest is definitely worth picking up. So.
Okay, if there aren't any questions, we shall wind down. Thank you so much, Anthony. That was really interesting as usual. Thank you from all of us. See you next time.
Yes, you're very welcome. I'm ready for number 5 whenever you want to do it.
Okay.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you, Anthony.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. I'm happy to help out.